Here's my friend Nathan. He and I share something in common in the fact that we're trying to build businesses around ideas that are unconventional. My idea is that goodness pays. There's no blueprint for that. Nathan's idea is about share, save, spend, in that order. There's no blueprint for that. But he's several years ahead of us. They've been at it for more than a decade. If you Google Nathan Dungan, there's thousands of hits. He's kind of a media darling. You'll see Wall Street Journal, New York Times, a whole bunch of personal interest things, some TV clips and things like that. What I'm excited about is that he's here today for you. Please join me in welcoming a good friend, Nathan Dungan.
It's great to be with you. Thank you, Paul. It's really an honor to be here. I've attended as a participant before, and so I know that there's just a lot of love in the room, so thanks for bringing that today. And I also know that, to Paul's point, this topic of money can be a tricky one. It can be a messy topic. And I'd like to just start for a moment, and I frame this out with one of my favorite books by Julia Cameron. It's called Blessings. And there's a little piece in here, excerpt in this book called "We Are Trustworthy Stewards of Our World." The world is a work in progress. We are the architects of a better world. In our hearts, we hold compassion, invention, clarity, and hope. We know right action. We know wisdom. We know divine intent. The world is safe in our keeping. We are loving. We are wise. We are good. We can change our world for the better. We can bring our best to the world. The whole world lies within each of us. Our every thought and act touch all. I am powerful. We are powerful. As I make my inner world gentle, harmonious, and joyful, I bring those qualities to the world which all of us share. I cherish the world which we share. I bless the world and those I share it with. And I really find a lot of kind of depth in that space, meaning in that space, in those words. It's a good reminder for me in the work that I do, because some days it's awesome and it's fun, and it's always been an incredible journey, and some days it's kind of hard. And so today, what I'd really like to step into and speak about is a little bit of my journey, but I really want to start with the importance of our money narrative. Everybody in this room has a money narrative. It's your story about money, right? It's where you came from. Those lessons, those things, those discussions, those arguments, those things that you've heard from your early days until today, and then it's the thing that you will be carrying forward. So I describe our money narrative as a collection of stories, right? People and experiences, values, goals, and actions. And when you put all of those things together in this kind of soup that is money and financial issues, this journey that we've been on, what I would really ask of you today is to think very substantively about your money narrative. Now, when it comes to money narrative, I believe there are two paths that we can choose, right, around this messy thing that is money. And the first path that I think we can choose is that you are proactively owning your money narrative, right? You're leaning into it, even though it's kind of messy, but you're consciously connecting your daily, weekly, monthly money choices with your values. And then you're letting those, even the most mundane of those decisions, you're letting those speak out into the world, right? Path one. Path two is the more passive or reactive approach regarding money. And specifically your money narrative. Now, for a variety of reasons, this is the more common path. And that's not a judgment, it's just an observation over almost 25 years of spending and time in this space, right? And this passive approach, again, more popular, and yet it comes with some real consequences, right? And one of the unintended consequences of Path 2 is that, in effect, you are outsourcing your money narrative to the culture, all right? And that culture is really the culture of consumption, right? That notion that when you spend, you will find your greatest source of joy or pleasure or meaning. And it's a false narrative. It is. It's a false narrative. And so the question is, how do we dig into that? I'm not saying spending's bad. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that it's a bit of a false narrative. Okay. What I like to call that is the culture of comparonomics, right? The culture of comparonomics, where we look around and we assess our success and our place and our space around others and how others are doing up against our own, and that tends to be or can be a bit of our driver. So what's at stake with this issue around money? What's really kind of at its core? And what I would say most critically and urgently is our well-being. Yes, our well-being at the essence of this journey around money matters. Our well-being, the well-being of the people that we care most about, and I would even argue the well-being of our communities, rests deeply inside of this space that can be very uncomfortable to explore, and that is this space of money. Now, like you, though, I am also on this journey, right? With my wife, daughter, I mean, we have not by any means reached the holy grail of financial well-being. You know, there are days where it's hard. There's days where we make mistakes and we have to reset or step back into it. And what I would submit to you is that we are very, very committed to Path 1 because we recognize there's a lot at stake around that path. And for sure, there's a lot of times, just even being here today and in this topic, where that Path 1, again, me included, it will push you well out of your comfort zone, right, around this thing that is money. So what I've learned from others and my own kind of introspection around this topic over the years is that the key to being on Path 1 is identifying your intrinsic drivers, those things that matter to you. What is it about this journey around money, around financial issues that matter? You can have all the people in the world telling you should do more of this, you should do more of that. But what I would say is that until you really dig in to your soul and say, what are the drivers around why I should make that choice around a share or a save or a spend, it's difficult to really get to that place and commit to what I would call that Path 1, the active path, right, about shaping our money narrative. Silence about money is the enemy of well-being. Silence about money is the enemy of well-being. It's critical that we bring this topic out of the shadows. I heard a speaker some years back at a conference that I was attending, and he had this just awesome line that I've used many times. Some of you in the room have heard it, and the line that goes like this: hope without a plan is denial. I can hope my situation gets better in this space, but absent a plan, really? Is it really going to get better? And I love on the good leadership stuff where they talk about doing. The doing piece of this, folks, is essential. And it's hard. I get that, and it's hard. So how did I get here? How did I get to this place? Because I'd love to tell you I had this master plan. No, it's been a pretty circuitous journey. The interesting thing of how I got here, ironically, starts here. And what I mean by here is Golden Valley Country Club. Seriously. Except it wasn't here. It was about a quarter of a mile over there, and it was in Bassett Creek. It runs through the course, if you know the course. And the reason that's important is because that was the genesis of one of my first jobs. I was a golf ball reseller. Seriously. A few of my buddies, 4th grade, 5th grade, we'd wander into the creek, no kidding, And I was thinking about that driving up today. We wander into the creek. We fish the golf balls out of the creek. We'd put them in, clean them up, sort them, put them in egg cartons, and then have them for sale for the golfers as they came through. Now, I learned some really important lessons from that work, by the way. I learned it's a fairly low cost of entry to get into that space, right? I learned that some lessons around quality control and pricing. So what's the pro shop charging for these things, right? These are important things to know. I learned about customer service. I learned about work hazards. Incoming, somebody would shout, right? I learned some new words and phrases as golf balls got placed into the creek by the golfers as they were approaching. I learned about the rule of law and what constitutes trespassing and what does not constitute trespassing. But seriously, right here, and I earned money, right? I earned money, and I earned money at a paper route that I had in the 5th and the 6th grade, and I learned about sacrifice, getting up at 5 in the morning and 4 in the morning to deliver newspapers in all kinds of weathers, and what did that mean? And I learned about, again, customer interaction and going door to door to collect money and sorting money and sitting at the kitchen table. And my parents taught me a lot about money. They engaged us a lot about money, and I call it the kitchen table lessons, right? And that is where they would sit openly, and when I was sitting there counting my money for the paper out, okay, how much do I have to do, how much do I have to pay for this? How much do I get to keep? And then, so what are you going to do with what you keep? And my parents weren't heavy-handed with it, but they did have some expectations, some standards that we would make choices. They had accounts for us set up where we could save money. They had expectations that we would share money, and of course that we could spend it too. And my parents paid their bills out in the open, so we could ask questions about, so what are you doing, right? Well, we're saving for, the next car. We're saving for your college or retirement. They told us when I was in 4th grade, I knew that our house on Olympia Avenue right over here cost $48,000. Why did I know that? Because they told us that, right? They didn't keep it in the shadows. They gave us the information, and then they challenged us to step into that information. And then I had more jobs, throughout high school, and that continued, where I continued to earn and learn about money and be challenged with it and make some good decisions and make some really stupid decisions around money, and yet it continued. Did I know I was going to do this work? No, I didn't. And then I came up to St. Olaf after high school. We were living in Texas at the time, and one of the most important things that I did at St. Olaf was I pursued a degree in speech communication. And that was a really, really good thing for me. It really got me out of my comfort zone. And for any of you in this room, Jennifer and I were talking about it, classmates at St. Olaf, if you've ever had to be up in front of a room, it can go from some good nerves to some debilitating nerves, right? And it's a really good thing. Again, pushing you out of your comfort zone. Jim Awney, who was my professor at St. Olaf, we had to sit down and watch ourselves on video give a talk. If you've ever done that, it's a very humbling experience. And yet, that, for me as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as a speaker, as a coach, as a consultant, probably one of the most valuable things that I did. Again, totally pushed me out of my comfort zone. After graduation, my mom, who was in financial services, she started here when we lived in Golden Valley, continued that work in Texas, and then ultimately had an agency out in Pennsylvania for Lutheran Brotherhood. And she said all through college, you'd be really good at this, you'd be really good at this. So shortly after graduation, I moved east to Pennsylvania, just outside, in between the Lehigh Valley and Philadelphia. I didn't know anybody. And I started in the field about money. And one of the great things about my mom is she said, you know what? I know you're creative, I know you're thoughtful. We're going to train you and then get after it and think about money. So she challenged me. And so that was one of the great experiences for me. I'm a little bit more of a qualitative guy, a little less of a quantitative guy. And it was a good intersection for me around money. And early on in my career, an educator by the name of Sally said, I want to take you to lunch. And she said, the reason I want to take you to lunch is I want to talk to you about my money story. And she said, I want to challenge you to do something for me. And I said, awesome, let's talk about it. So we did, went to lunch, and she said, here's my observation. She said, Nathan, as I look out into the world, it would appear to me, Sally was an educator, that individuals, families are having a difficult time just talking about money. And she said, could you help me step into that space? And I said, I don't know, I'll try. So I was pretty naive, but I did. And so I created this little workshop called Parents, Kids, and Money to help adolescents and their parents, even some grandparents, step into the conversation of money. I thought it was a one-off thing. For me, though, it was like a lightning bolt. It's like, this is where you're supposed to be. I didn't really know what that meant when I stepped away from that one time, but she said, this is where, or for me, this is where you're supposed to be. So she challenged me to be in that space. And what I started to get really curious about, and really that incident, her request of me, getting me out of my comfort zone, she requested, and it launched me into contemplating my vocational hypothesis. And so this is my vocational hypothesis, what I've been thinking about ever since. Who and what is shaping our money habits and values? How is that impacting our well-being? And why should we care? All right, and why should we care? So that has served as my vocational hypothesis as in the work we do and the tools that we create ever since kind of stepping out from those early days. So in 1998, I did very well in that space as a financial advisor in 98. I was asked to move back here to the Twin Cities, where I was vice president of brand and marketing, communications, and ultimately fraternal for what is now Thrivent Financial, then Lutheran Brotherhood. And I kept thinking about that topic. I kept thinking about that topic of, who or what is shaping our money habits, our well-being, and why should we care? I started researching, getting really curious about, who is impacting that the most. I started going to conferences. One in particular that I went to was a conference out in New York where they were teaching people about how to market to kids, how to get kids to spend more money, how to nag their parents and their grandparents to buy things for them that maybe they didn't need, right? And I learned a lot at that conference. And on the second day of the conference, it was a day like today, and I walked out of my little place where I was staying in the village. It's gorgeous, out walking down on Hudson Street, getting ready to jump in a cab to go downtown to NYU for the conference. And I looked up in the sky and there was a building on fire. So something inside of me said, you probably shouldn't go downtown. I don't know what it was. I went back to my few blocks, back to my where I was staying. I turned on the TV and I was like, that seems weird. Went back out, walking down Hudson Street again, and that's when the second plane hit the tower. So, for 4 days, I was there. Couldn't go anywhere. So I thought a lot about what was going on, right? Thought about my journey, my opportunities, waited in line for 8 hours to give blood at St. Vincent's, the trauma hospital, because they thought they were going to bring a lot of people into the hospital, right? And I met a lot of amazing people in line, but I ultimately had to rent a car to drive home. And it was in that drive home that I said, what are you waiting for? So I ultimately came back, and then it was in ultimately 2002, then early, that I left my job, security, at Thrivent, and I stepped away because they were going through a merger, and I had a voluntary severance option, and I said, okay, I'm going to write a book. And so I spent a year working on my first book, Prodigal Sons and Material Girls, How Not to Be Your Child's ATM, and then I launched yeah. I know, I always forget that actually does get a good laugh. So, and then it really launched me into creating Share, Save, Spend, and I launched Share, Save, Spend in 2003. And the work that we do now is we do a lot of consulting work with families and organizations around the issue of money and the role that it plays in their lives, and helping them pursue path one, right? Shaping their money narrative, thinking about their values, informing how they make money choices. And we do that all over the country, actually all over the world. And when I started Share, Save, Spend, it was, I knew we needed tools. People needed tools, just like the 7F wheel and the awesome 7F's book, of how do you get into this topic more substantively, more meaningfully? I know people want to be in path one, but they're just not exactly sure how to do it, and it's messy, and it's like fits and starts. So, earlier, I talked about this issue of well-being and how critical it is. And well-being matters, right? The American Psychological Association every year does this significant study called Stress in America. And they measure what's going on in Americans' lives. And they ask them, okay, what are the things that stress you out the most? Any guesses as to what number one is? Money. And interesting though, if you look at numbers 2 through 10, because it's a top 10 list, if you look at 2 through 10, directly and indirectly, it's money. What we also know from Emory University, from the Mayo Clinic, from Cleveland Clinic, because they've studied stress a lot, they also know that stress is the #1 predictor for negative health outcomes. And at the top of the list is money. And yet, we have no idea what the heck to do with that. Where do we go with it? And it just sits and sort of churns, and it's like, where do we go? What do we do? So one of the things that I early, kind of in that launching of Share, Save, Spend, is I connected with this guy, Dr. Tim Kasser. And Tim is this brilliant researcher out of Knox College. He's one of the foremost researchers in the world on the impact of well-being, or of materialism on your well-being, right? So he's done just a lot of, so we joined together. He knew that we had tools, he had this methodology, and so we studied 200 adolescent parent-child pairs. We studied them for 2 years because we wanted to know, can you move the needle on well-being around this topic? And what we found at the end of 2 years, it had never been studied before, what we found is you can move the needle. So we had half of the group randomly assigned into a control group. We had the other half in our intervention, learning that I facilitated. We did research around that. And what we learned over those 2 years was really critical, is that all of the adolescents, when we first started, said that they had high materialism measures, right? So spending money was really important to them. Not terribly unusual for adolescents, right? But what we found, though, at the end of the study, of the people who were in the actual intervention and the learning, we learned some really important things. That is when they were with peers, with other adults, with a parent, over the course of 2 years, those young people, their self-esteem measures started going like this, or up, and their materialism measures started going down. And the control group over here, same study but no intervention, their materialism measures kept climbing and their self-esteem kept dropping, right? So what we know about that is getting into the topic. And it wasn't magic. It was just helping them, curating some of these conversations with them, stepping into it was really critical. Okay. This book is really awesome, called Well-Being. Tom Rath, you may know Tom Rath because he does the StrengthsFinder stuff, right? And they did this phenomenal research around well-being all over the world, and what they discovered is there's 5 really critical elements that you need to be paying attention to in your life: your career well-being, your vocation, really your purpose, what Richard Leiter was talking about. So career well-being, social well-being, financial well-being, physical well-being, and community well-being. And in financial well-being, they basically boiled it down to 3 things. A, if you, it's really important to have some measure of financial security, live within your means. 2, spend money on experiences, not stuff. And 3, be generous, give money away. Share, save, spend. Right? Share, save, spend. So the research that we did, other research that's been done, launched us into this really cool tool called Money Sanity, which we'll talk more about in a little bit. When you take ownership of your money narrative, it opens a world of possibilities. When you view your money choices as a vote, and you let your values drive that vote, it matters. And it positively impacts your well-being and the well-being of those around you, and I would argue, our communities. It has this ripple effect of kind of how it works and the goodness that comes from that. And so let me close with this really meaningful and simple Chinese proverb. I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. So my challenge and request of you today is to commit to doing. Thank you.
Thank you. So in your table program in the center here, there are 2 things. One is a discussion question that says, what success habit with your finances helps you be a better leader? That's your discussion question. And then just to the left of that, you'll see the green, the start, stop, continue exercise. This is one of our favorite development plans. So if you're paying attention and you really are intentional about what he's asking you to do, you'll discuss that question and you'll put at least one comment in: start, stop, and continue. Ready, set, go. Boy, the conversations were intense. I love it. I love it. We got into a great conversation immediately. You and I share so many things. We're authors, we're speakers, we travel a lot. We started these businesses with no real path.
Yeah.
You've ended up from the consulting side, Share, Save, Spend, into this internet-driven tool that really has huge possibilities called Money Sanity U. Will you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to say is Money Sanity U is a Path 1 tool. Right, so when I was talking about the 2 paths, and it's really designed, it grew out of our research that we did with adolescents and their parents, and what we found is that they needed new tools to be able to help them launch into these really critical conversations. And so what we found is our challenge was, okay, how do you get that into very digestible, short form learning where you can take an immediate action? So, you know, in the money space, doing money simply is hard, right? Stepping into kind of what are meaty topics like couples and money secrets, it's a hard thing. And we boiled it down, so there's these 75, virtual or these video topics in the library, Money Sanity U, and they're 3 to 5 minutes long, and it's a springboard to then step into an action. Every single one of them has an action, and go. And the idea is really about Path 1. It's all about helping to shape narrative proactively and enhance financial well-being. So we have companies using it all over the country. We have financial service companies. We have family offices. I mean, we have a whole menagerie of folks that are using that as a tool.
And soon consumers can use that
Yeah, and
as
soon,
well?
we're working right now that now it's just available through organizations, but next year we'll launch it and open it up to the general public.
So we also share one thing in that our businesses are owned by our families, which means we work with our wives.
Yes, yeah, we do.
So, how's it going?
Yeah, it's right on. It's going really well. I actually had to work on Susan. She's very talented. She's smart. I had to work on her for about 5 years to say, "Come on, we can work this." I don't know, but we have such different skills, complementary kinds of skills. She's pretty tech savvy. She's actually really tech savvy. So she manages like our whole Money Sanity U library, all of the relationships of different people that we work with. And so she's a great manager. I'm an okay manager. She's a really good manager. And so it works well, and we kind of work that space. One of the things we love is it gives us some time freedom working together. And so I love walking our daughter, who's 7, to the bus in the morning. And then we typically together, we're going to get her from school. So we kind of make this all work. But it's been a good dynamic. I mean, working with a spouse, there's days that are really good, and there's days where I'm sure she looks at me like, seriously, you are crazy. But it's been a really, really rich space. Yeah.
So you have a 7-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
And you're into this financial responsibility
Yeah.
thing. So what is the dinner conversation like with a 7-year-old girl about money?
Well, it's interesting. I just, out of my pocket, I pulled, when she was probably our daughter, get this, our daughter's name is Elsa. I know, right? I know what you're thinking. When did you name her, right? And she always tells people, I was named before the movie, right? But so, yeah, I talk about marketing, cultural messages. But when she was really young, like 2 years old, I have in my pocket, I always carry with me, because it reminds me of her, a penny, a nickel, a dime, and a quarter. And we would play this little game where if she could guess correctly which president, first of all, which coin was it and which president was on it, she could put it into her little Share, Save, Spend bank. And so it started because money with kids is really tactile. And so we do have a lot of money conversations. She uses Share Money. I love the idea, by the way, of LSS and doing that. That's just awesome. We're going to come, if we're in town, we're going to come participate in that. Thanks for that invite. But I think it's just this way of engaging. So for me and Susan, it's, there's days and weeks that we do well with her with that, and there's days and weeks where we don't. And so part of it is on us to keep coming back at it. Right?
Yeah, well, that's certainly real. Well,
Yeah.
Let's jump to the vision question. What's next? What's coming? And then the second part of this, how can we help you?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. What's coming is I woke up in the middle of the night about a month and a half ago, and I decided I'm going to work on another book. And I know, how that is. It's hard. It's hard work, but it just boom. And it's going to be around this notion of comparonomics. This whole idea about how that can kind of drive us, and we can all get caught up in that. What does that mean? So that's the next thing. taking Money Sanity to you to that next level. And we have 75 topics in there now. We have another 100 topics identified, so we've got this really great space we're on. And in terms of helping us, I mean, I think, A, it's just, first of all, taking and putting practice into your own lives. I think that's the most important thing.
Sure.
And then B, I think, is if you are moved by some of this and want to have a conversation, we create these tools for you. Because we get inspiration around the topics around that library from you. So continue to be in conversation, right?
Fantastic.